Hey everyone, Ben here and welcome to Motivation to Invest. Should you buy a property at auction? What are the positives and negatives of buying a property? All shall be revealed in this video. In part one of this video, I'm going to discuss the positives and negatives of buying a property via an auction. In part two of this video, I'm going to reveal to you guys my top 6 tips for being successful when purchasing a property in an auction. And then in part 3 of this video, I'm going to give you guys my theory on due diligence, which you should do, and it's vitally important that you do this if you're even considering buying a property at auction, because it's a completely different game than buying a property through an estate agent in the traditional manner. An auction is like the wild wild west, and you need to be on guard. You need to have your guns loaded and ready to actually take advantage of the potential deals at an auction, but also not fall down the traps and holes which you can find in many auction processes. Let me just set the table for you. Let me set the scene of an auction. So let's say you're in this busy room, full to the top of people, obviously pandemic. You're in this room, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of heat in this room. You've got a fast talking auction broker up front, he's rattling through various different properties. Let's say there's a certain one that you spotted prior to the auction, it's on your list and you're considering buying this, and then somebody else bids higher than another person, then you can actually become overcome by many emotional biases. And the dangerous part about auctions is you can actually get sucked in to this whole process. So I'm going to dive into that in my positives and negatives part of this video, and how you guys can actually mitigate the risk. In an auction, there is a lot of volatility, but there's also a lot of opportunity. So if you can manage the risk, then you can take advantage of the opportunity. But before we get right into this video, guys, if you're new around here and you want more investing tips and exclusive stock market picks, which I'm personally investing into, and property investing tips of course, then feel free to subscribe to this channel and join the investing family by hitting that subscribe button and turning that notification bell on. And if you guys do find any value at all in this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up. That helps out tremendously with the channel. And with that being said, let's dive in. So firstly, part one of this video, what are the positives and negatives of buying a property at an auction? Well, the first positive I can see is the property is usually being sold by a motivated seller. And motivated sellers can equal great deals in the market, because this person may need to sell the property fast. They may have gone through a divorce, maybe someone has died, or maybe some other reason or some situation has happened in that person's life, or maybe they're just sick of the property and they want to sell it really fast. A motivated seller can equal great opportunities for deals. Now, the second positive is it takes just a short time to complete. So there's no messing around. There's no 4 to 6 months to 8 months to actually purchase the property. If you win the auction, you usually complete in a very rapid amount of time. And this is the idea of the auction.
Better than 15, 20, I better than 15, better than 20, down 5, better than 30, and 30, and 30, 25, better.
Now I know what you guys are thinking, Ben, that all sounds fantastic, but what about the negatives? Well, the negatives, there are quite a few negatives. Well, the first negative I can see is the property usually has something wrong with it. And this is what you need to do your due diligence and research and actually find out what is wrong with the property. Why is the property up for auction? Because usually people don't want to sell a property at a discounted price or with a quick sale if there isn't something wrong with the property or some specific reason why they are selling the property. Now, the second negative is part of the entire auction process. So the winner is actually the person who's willing to pay the most for that property. Now, this is quite ironic in a way, because you're going there to find a deal, but actually if you win the auction, you're the person who decided to pay more than everybody else in that room. You could call this the greater fool theory. So that is a risk with auction. And there's also the emotion of the auction room, getting caught up in it all, trying to beat somebody else and actually win the property, or getting caught with your emotional biases. Now, a great tip for this, which I'll get into more in my tips part of this video, is to actually have a predetermined price which you're willing to pay, a ceiling price which you're willing to pay for a specific property before you enter the auction room. Because once you're in the auction room, once you're in the boiler room, your decisions can become a lot worse, and you may actually purchase a property and you may actually pay over the odds for a property of which you didn't wish to do. So that is a major risk with auctions.
Sir, 25 of them, you're out. I'm at a dung, 25 at a dung, 30, 30, now 5. I'm 35 at a dung, 40. But
So this really goes on to my third negative of buying properties at an auction. Beware of the person managing the auction because there's a lot of emotion tied into this. So do not get emotionally attached to the property you're purchasing and buy with formulas, not feelings. That's my personal advice on buying a property at an auction. Now, this may be even worse if you've actually paid for a survey prior to actually attending the auction, which you may have to do if you're purchasing an auction property, as you need to have all the surveys complete before you actually enter the auction room, or at least have details of them if the vendor has had these surveys done previously. So if you're emotionally and financially invested, it can make it even more difficult to actually restrain yourself and still get a good deal at an auction.
$40, 35 at a dung, 40. I'm at 35 down, 40, 40, now 5 at a dung.
So with this crazy auction room, how can we actually mitigate these risks and actually take advantage of the opportunities? Well, here are my top 6 tips for success. The first tip is to actually stand at the back of the room. So you don't want to be at the front of the room, you want to be at the back of the room so you can see all the different bidders and you can observe exactly what's going on and you can observe when there's a potential opportunity. And the best way to get deals is to actually sit at the back of the room, wait for people to bid, wait for them to get caught up in the emotion, and then you can simply step in later and actually bid and take advantage of a deal. Once other people are emotionally exhausted,
45 at a dung, 50. Sold 45, sold them $45, put them on 281.
or they're just not interested in the prop. Let's say a new lot comes in and the auction announcer announces the property, he has to keep dropping the price. No one seems to want the property. No one's interested in the property. You know about the property. You have your fair value price, which you wish to pay. Then you can step in and actually make a bid on the property.
I have now 10. I bid 5. Would you bid 10? I bid 5.
Now, the second tip is a vital part of the auction process. You need to have cash there ready on standby to actually purchase the property, or bridging finance in place. You can't get a traditional mortgage on the property because it's just not fast enough. You could get bridging finance, which usually charge a higher interest rate, and that can help you to buy the property before you can get your proper mortgage in place. Or you can also buy with cash, because if you win the bidding, you're legally required to complete on the property as fast as possible. And this goes on to my third tip for success when buying a property at auction, and this is to have your power team on standby. So you should have your solicitors there on standby, ready to go. You can't just ring them up and say, I've just won this auction, I need you to file all this paperwork. They need to be ready to go on standby with all the documentation in place in order to complete as quickly as possible. And I'll briefly mention tip number 4 again, and this is have a ceiling price and don't go over your limit. Now, tip number 5 is a real great one for success when buying at auctions, and one of my personal favorites. So this is actually to buy a property pre-auction or post-auction. Then you're not getting caught up in all this emotion and all these different things which are going on in the auction room. You're actually buying the property pre-auction or post-auction. Now, post-auction is great because let's say a property hasn't sold and the seller, the vendor's sitting there thinking, oh, I'm gutted, I haven't sold my property. Then you can then approach them with an offer, with a reasonable offer. I personally would suggest slightly over the asking price for the property, but not massively over. You could even approach them with an offer slightly under the asking price, but you could basically say, of course, the property hasn't sold, you wish to sell, I'm willing to offer to buy the property right now from you after the auction has complete. Now, there is a risk with this, of course, if the property actually sells in the auction, but if it doesn't, there could be an opportunity there for profit. And you can also buy it pre-auction if the private seller wants to sell the property pretty fast, doesn't want to go through all the auction hassle, then you can actually buy the property pre-auction. Now, do be aware, guys, some institutional sellers such as councils and governments, they do need the transparency of the auction process, so they won't be allowed in general to accept pre-auction offers. So that's something you guys need to be aware of if you're trying to buy a property in these areas. And on to tip number 6 for success, and this is where to sell a property at auction, how to sell a property at auction. And again, you could actually sell your property after the auction has complete. For example, let's say there's 10 lots at the auction, and let's say there's a room of 50, 60 people, 10 people win, and let's say there's 50 people left who have missed out on actually buying a property, and they're actually sitting there ready to buy a property, but they've missed out on all the properties at the auction. Then you could approach them and say, basically, I've got this property for sale, Are you interested in buying it? And this could be actually a great time to make some connections, do some networking, and even sell your property post-auction. Okay, on to part 3, and this is arguably the most important part of this video, guys, and this is doing your due diligence on the property at auction before actually entering the auction room. So you need to do a lot of research on the property before you actually consider buying it at an auction. You need to dive into the legal pack by yourself, and I would suggest with a solicitor or lawyer. So check the property legal pack and look for the special conditions, which are the key elements of each sale, the terms of each sale, the tenancy agreement, etc. So here's a few legal pack tips. Firstly, look for what there is and what could be missing. Look at the special conditions of the sale. For example, the seller may actually slip something in there which is a little sneaky and make you responsible for arrears or debts on the property. There may be an agent's fee, there may be a cost for searches, there may be a completion date which actually might be shorter than you might expect, for example 28 days after the auction has complete. For example, someone could actually limit that down so you have to complete in an even faster amount of time. Then of course the second tip there is to look at the deeds and title on the property. Does the seller of the property actually own the property? And you'd be surprised, some people actually try to sell properties which they don't even own. Doesn't tend to happen too much in the West, but definitely if you're going abroad in many foreign countries, it's quite common there for people to sell what they don't actually own. Make sure the searches have been complete on the property by a solicitor, or you may have to actually do this. Check there's no major works notices, for example, a roof repair, which is due. Really, in this process, you've got to consider yourself like Sherlock Holmes, and you've really got to be looking for the reason why this person is selling their property at an auction. There could be something wrong with it. There could be some sort of issue in the paperwork, and you need to actually find out this. I would also personally suggest checking with your council the property planning history for this property. Have they previously had a property planning application approved on the property or even denied on the property, for example, to convert the property, house of multiple occupancy or a block of flats or whatever else it may be. Now, I did a previous video on how to add value to a property doing refurbishment with my own personal case study where I actually purchased a rental property and I did some refurbishment on the actual property in order to increase the value of that property by around £20,000 to £30,000. So I'll leave a link for that video in the description below. So that's today's video, guys. I hope you found this valuable. If you did, feel free to give this video a big thumbs up. That helps out tremendously with the channel. I'd love to hear your thoughts on buying a property at auction. Do you think it's good to buy a property at auction, or do you think it's not good to buy a property at auction? Comment your thoughts below. Comment any tips which I may have missed in this video on buying a property at auction in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, feel free to join the investing family by hitting that subscribe button and turning that notification bell on. And with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have an incredible day, and I'll see you in my next video. Invest safe.